They laughed when Anthony married Celeste, a black woman and single mother of three. Friends, family, everyone believed he was throwing his future away. But every sneer and taunt only strengthened Anthony's resolve. At a charity event where Anthony served on the organizing committee, he overheard a heated dispute brewing in the corner of the room. A black woman, Celeste, was speaking forcefully, confronting some of the coordinators about the lack of assistance offered to black families through the charitable fund. "Why aren't black families deemed worthy of support?" Celeste asked, her eyes fierce with indignation. "If we only help those who look like us, what's the point of charity at all?" A stunned hush fell over the room. A few people murmured in disapproval, but Celeste stood her ground. Intrigued by her conviction, Anthony approached her. "Thank you for speaking up," he said. "I'm Anthony. What you said just now, I found it incredibly inspiring." Celeste regarded him with a look of surprise, then offered a small smile. Someone had to stand up for what's right, didn't they? In that instant, Anthony realized he was speaking to a remarkable woman. Curious, he asked her what had brought her to the charity event. With gentle warmth, Celeste explained that her 3 young children were also present. She wanted them to learn that, although their family faced many difficulties, they still had the responsibility to fight for their community and spread love wherever they went. She also explained that she was a single mother, both sole provider and parent, striving to raise her children with kindness and integrity. Anthony was moved by her dedication. Raising 3 children alone was admirable enough, but showing them how to live with compassion and responsibility made him respect her even more. From that day forward, Anthony began to see Celeste in a new light, not merely as someone he liked, but as a woman whose resilience and resolute spirit astonished him. Still, on his way home, Anthony felt a gnawing sense of dread. He was white, from a conventional family that held strongly to traditional beliefs. He was drawn to Celeste, but part of him worried about the judgment of others. Could he withstand society's scrutiny and that of his own parents? Did Celeste even want to get to know him more deeply? After pondering these questions for days, Anthony realized his feelings were more serious than he'd initially thought. Celeste's strength and her graceful approach to life were irresistibly appealing. Deciding he couldn't let his fears control his future, he made a bold move. He called to invite Celeste out for coffee, framing it as a thank you for her assistance at the event, though, in truth, she hadn't done much for him personally. She was surprised by the invitation but agreed. Anthony's heart soared when she accepted. Over steaming lattes in a cozy cafe, he learned more about her, how she was holding down multiple jobs, the tremendous sacrifices she'd made for her children, and how deeply she valued love and conscience. He discovered that Celeste was not just someone living day to day. She infused meaning into everything she did, especially where her children were concerned. Hearing her experiences only solidified Anthony's desire to learn more about her. That single afternoon coffee date was far more than a kind gesture. It was the starting point of something life-changing. Their connection deepened after that first coffee, evolving into lengthy phone calls and late-night chats. Anthony soon discovered Celeste was both brilliant and keenly aware of life's complexities, traits he'd seldom encountered in others. She freely discussed the challenges she faced as a black single mother of 3. She described the judgmental stares, the subtle discrimination her children endured, and the biases from people who should have known better, like teachers responsible for nurturing students, or neighbors who never passed up the chance to criticize. Celeste recalled a recent episode when a neighbor complained she was letting her kids run wild for merely playing on the lawn. Though she tried to shrug it off, those words stung. Anthony recognized Celeste's unbreakable will, forged by fighting for her children's well-being in a world often marred by prejudice. She transformed hostility into fuel to love and protect her family even more fiercely. To Anthony, she was a shining beacon of maternal resilience. As Anthony's feelings for Celeste flourished, the cultural chasm between them became more evident with every heart-to-heart conversation. Growing up in a black community, Celeste had a keen sensitivity to racial injustice, an awareness Anthony, with his more sheltered upbringing, lacked. The prejudice she and her children routinely experienced ranging from school incidents to medical appointments, left Anthony aghast. He realized if he truly wanted to be with Celeste, love alone wouldn't cut it. He would have to shoulder the burden of social and racial stigmas. He also knew his parents would almost certainly disapprove. Celeste wasn't just a single mother. She was Black. Anthony braced himself for a difficult road ahead. But whenever doubt creeped in, he was buoyed by the memory of Celeste's calm, dignified manner, unbowed by injustice and fully devoted to her kids. She was worth every obstacle. During a quiet conversation one evening, Celeste confided the daily burdens she carried. Sleepless nights spent fretting over money, the demands of working from dawn until dusk, and the heaviness in her heart whenever she felt her children were unfairly targeted. She detailed petty humiliations, a cashier eyeing her suspiciously as she paid with a larger bill, or a teacher making tactless comments that singled out her kid's different background. Though Celeste was tough enough to handle these insults, Anthony could see that none of them truly bounced off. Each left a bruise, no matter how stoically she bore it. Listening to her, Anthony's admiration only deepened. He recognized he wasn't just stepping into a relationship with Celeste. He was stepping into the vortex of racial and cultural biases she'd battled all her life. The difference between fleeting affection and genuine commitment had never been clearer to him. He had to decide if he was prepared to stand by Celeste and her children, unwavering, or if he'd flee at the first sign of trouble. After nights of contemplation, Anthony concluded that hiding this budding relationship from his family was unfair to both Celeste and himself. If he intended to pursue a future with her, it was time to introduce her to his parents. Anxiety knotted his stomach at the thought of their likely reaction, but Anthony felt certain if he allowed prejudice to dominate his decisions, he would forever regret not fighting for the woman he loved. Finally, he arranged for Celeste and her 3 children to meet his parents, Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Elizabeth. Stepping inside their stately home, he felt Celeste's hand tighten in his. His parents stood, wearing an unmistakable chill on their faces. Elizabeth's gaze swept over Celeste and the children with an icy disdain. "Anthony," she said in a clipped tone, "have you really thought through the consequences of bringing them here? Do you believe this is a wise decision?" Anthony swallowed his anger, gripping Celeste's hand for courage. "Mom," he said calmly, "this is Celeste, and these are her kids. I love them all. I want you and Dad to see they're an important part of my life." Thomas frowned, arms folded over his chest. "Our family has standards," he said gravely. "Reputation. Don't you understand you're putting us all at risk? Are you ready to give up everything you've built?" Celeste swallowed the hurt, threatening to overwhelm her. Keeping her voice steady, she tried to reason with them. "Sir, ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but our feelings are real. I only want respect from your family, no more, no less." Elizabeth let out a scornful laugh. "You think you deserve respect? You and these children don't belong here. We don't need to stoop to accept." "That's enough," Anthony cut in, trembling with anger. "This is my family, and I will not let you insult them." Thomas's face hardened. "You've made a reckless choice, Anthony. Society will judge you, as will our extended family. Are you truly willing to be shunned?" Celeste's composure held, though Anthony felt her hand quivering slightly. "I know cultural and racial differences can be hard to accept," she said softly, "but I'm hoping we can find some common ground, because all I want is a peaceful life with the man I love." Elizabeth snorted, not bothering to mask her prejudice. "Common ground? Don't be naive. We want nothing to do with people like you." "Mom," Anthony shouted, his face pained but resolute. "These are my family members. If you can't respect them, then I can't remain here either. I love them, and I refuse to sacrifice our happiness to appease outdated biases." A strangling tension seized the room. Thomas and Elizabeth turned away in stony silence, their faces etched with anger and disappointment. Anthony sensed this fight was just beginning. If he truly wanted a life with Celeste, he would have to prepare for a long and heartbreaking battle. The car ride back was subdued. Celeste attempted to reassure Anthony that she wasn't entirely surprised by his parents' hostility. She'd dealt with discrimination for most of her life. Still, she'd hoped they might be open to getting to know her and her children better. Her acceptance of their reaction stung Anthony even more, realizing how accustomed she'd become to prejudice. Once home, Anthony took Celeste's hand. "I know this is going to be an uphill climb, but I won't let prejudiced views tear us apart. You and your children deserve respect, and I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure you have it." Celeste smiled bravely, touched by his commitment. She promised that she would stand by him, too, no matter how long or difficult the road might become. From that moment forward, Anthony knew their life together meant forging a new path, one defined by their convictions, not by society's limiting expectations. Anthony felt the weight of it all: cultural differences, his parents' disapproval, friends and acquaintances' silent judgment. He also sensed that Celeste's children were the innocent victims in this. They, too, would face questions and unkind words from peers. Determined not to bow to such negativity, Anthony decided to try again with his parents, even if it took repeated conversations. He wanted to help them see that his feelings for Celeste were real and profound, not some passing fling. He arranged a dinner with them, hoping they would meet him halfway. This time, only Thomas and Elizabeth came over, without the added pressure of Celeste and the children in the same room. Anthony explained how he admired Celeste's perseverance and generosity, her willingness to give of herself not only for her kids but for the community, too. He talked about how society's biases had unfairly complicated her life, how she had to constantly fight for her children's well-being. Elizabeth looked thoughtful but still wary. Thomas, too, wore a grave expression. Anthony saw the faintest shift in their demeanors, perhaps just enough to make them reconsider. But acceptance wouldn't be instant. He knew it would take time for them to unlearn their prejudices. Still, he left that evening feeling a lightness in his chest. For the first time, he believed there was a chance, however slim, that his parents might eventually open their hearts. In the following days, Anthony's resolve to make Celeste and her children a permanent part of his future grew to a fervent pitch. Waking up one morning, he decided it was time to cement their bond. He wanted Celeste to know that he wasn't going anywhere, that he'd protect her and her kids always. So, one afternoon, he carefully selected an engagement ring, a simple, elegant piece with a single sparkling stone, luminous but understated, something that would resonate with Celeste's quiet strength and reflect his intentions, a pure, enduring commitment. That evening, Anthony invited Celeste to a small restaurant, the very one they had frequented when they first started dating. Its warm lights and soft music recalled the fledgling days of their friendship. When Celeste arrived, wearing a graceful, flowing dress, Anthony felt his heart flutter with anticipation. They shared a meal, reminiscing about how far they had come. Anthony steeled himself, then reached for Celeste's hand across the table. "Celeste," he said gently, voice trembling with a mix of nerves and devotion. "From the moment I met you, you've shown me a love and resilience unlike anything I've ever seen. You've given your children the gift of compassion and hope even when the world wasn't always kind. You've inspired me to become a better man." Celeste gazed at him, her eyes glimmering with emotion. Anthony pressed forward. "I want to be part of that strength. I want your children to know that I'm here for them, that they can count on me in every way, financially, emotionally, spiritually. You've taught me that a real family is built on love and unity. Celeste, will you marry me?" He presented the little velvet box, opening it to reveal the ring. Tears formed in her eyes. She nodded before she could even speak. "Yes," she whispered, her voice alive with love and relief. Anthony slipped the ring onto her finger, overwhelmed by a sense of destiny. The restaurant faded from view. In that moment, it was only them, forging a bond deeper than any obstacle. Celeste's eyes shone, reflecting a future where the two of them and the children would walk forward together. The proposal was a pinnacle of emotion and gratitude. Celeste had spent so many years believing she'd have to face the world alone, prepared for sneers and rejection. She never dared dream she might find a partner who not only accepted her but valued and loved her children as his own. She pressed her forehead against Anthony's, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching. "I never imagined someone would choose me, would choose us, so wholeheartedly. But here you are." Anthony's own voice was choked with emotion. "Celeste, I promise I will always stand with you. You don't have to bear anything alone anymore." That night, they lingered long after their dessert plates were cleared, simply basking in the shared silence, a silence brimming with all they had promised each other. After their intimate wedding ceremony, Anthony and Celeste began their married life with soaring optimism. But the day-to-day realities of supporting a household of 5 soon kicked in. The financial responsibilities were immense. From rent to groceries to the children's academic fees. Anthony worked extra shifts, returning home drained yet determined to ensure his family never felt deprived. Celeste looked for ways to trim the budget, doing what she could to ease his load. Meanwhile, the prejudice they faced still loomed, though in subtler forms. Living in a predominantly white neighborhood, Celeste noticed the sidelong glances they'd get at the grocery store or the hushed conversations that abruptly stopped whenever she and the children walked by. One day, at a neighborhood get-together, a few people Anthony considered acquaintances made backhanded remarks like, "We never expected Anthony to make such a drastic choice." Thinly veiled references to race and background were hidden behind forced smiles. Each comment stung, but Anthony tried to keep calm, reminding himself that protecting Celeste and the children meant picking his battles while still standing firm whenever confronted by open bigotry. At night, Celeste urged Anthony to share his worries. She sensed his frustration when people questioned his choice or doubted their marriage. "We knew it wasn't going to be easy," she would say, resting her hand gently on his. "But what we have is real. It's worth fighting for." Her steadfast conviction kept him going. Despite the subtle ostracism from their community, Anthony refused to hide or isolate themselves. They continued attending local events, making friends with those who welcomed them, and ignoring the cold shoulders from others. Gradually, a small circle of supportive neighbors emerged, those who appreciated Celeste's warmth and the joyful energy the children brought. The more time they spent with these families, the more Anthony realized that acceptance often outshines prejudice. It was a reminder that not everyone judged them for their differences. Slowly but surely, Anthony felt a shift in the way some people treated them. Maybe they saw the integrity with which Celeste raised her children, or the unwavering devotion Anthony showed. Step by step, they were carving out a place in a community that had once rejected them. However, the children could not entirely avoid the effects of discrimination. Their eldest daughter, let's call her Aaliyah, started coming home from school unusually quiet and withdrawn. She had been excluded from a group activity simply because she didn't look like the rest of the kids. Worse, Aaliyah overheard comments that her father wasn't even her real dad, or that Celeste had trapped him. At such a tender age, Aaliyah felt these words keenly and struggled to process them. Celeste reassured her daughter. "Some people don't understand us," she said gently, stroking her hair. "But that doesn't change who we are. We're a family. You belong wherever you want to be." Anthony, too, did his best to be a stable and affirming figure in Aaliyah's life. Whenever he sensed she was hurting, he'd remind her that the negative voices weren't worth sacrificing her happiness. "We love you exactly as you are," he would say, "and anyone who doesn't see that is missing out." Over time, Celeste and Anthony noticed improvement. Their children learned resilience from watching their parents stand tall against adversity. Aaliyah began to regain some confidence, volunteering to read in class, joining clubs, and making new friends who valued her for who she was. Still, the scars from discrimination did not fade overnight. Celeste and Anthony remained vigilant, ready to support the children whenever they needed it. As the months turned into years, life in the old neighborhood began to feel stifling. While a few neighbors and friends embraced them, others never moved past thinly veiled contempt or outright bigotry. The children felt it, too. Aaliyah commented that she was tired of always being watched as though she didn't belong. This prompted Anthony and Celeste to discuss moving to a more diverse city, a place with a stronger acceptance of multicultural families. Although relocating brought financial uncertainties, They reasoned that it was worth it if it meant providing a more welcoming environment for their kids. They found a city known for its open-minded community and multicultural landscape. Packing up their lives was daunting, but the promise of a fresh start revitalized them. Although finances remained tight, rent, moving costs, and job searches, Anthony and Celeste persevered. Initially, adapting to the new city wasn't simple. Anthony attended multiple job interviews before landing a stable position, while Celeste sought ways to connect with like-minded parents. Over time, they discovered a community group for multicultural families, which provided a support network of people facing similar challenges. The children gradually settled into their new schools, forging friendships more easily than before. For the first time, they experienced not being the only different kids in the room. With each passing month, they felt more at home. Neighbors stopped by with housewarming gifts or asked how they were settling in, curious rather than suspicious. By tackling new challenges side by side, the family grew stronger than ever. Anthony and Celeste often reflected on how far they'd come, transforming adversity into a foundation for genuine unity. Their story of resilience and blended family love soon began to resonate beyond their immediate circle. Curious acquaintances started asking about their journey, how they handled the prejudice, how they stayed strong, realizing they might provide hope to others going through similar hardships. Celeste and Anthony began sharing their experiences on social media. Their posts garnered significant attention, inspiring others in mixed-race or multicultural relationships to reach out. People who once felt isolated found solace in reading about Anthony and Celeste's triumphs and struggles. The messages included stories of heartbreak, resilience, and small victories, like a reluctant grandparent finally accepting a new in-law, or a school instituting an anti-bullying policy after one too many incidents. Among the supporters was a renowned philanthropist who was deeply touched by Anthony and Celeste's perseverance. One morning, Anthony received a phone call from this person's foundation, offering not just financial help, but also public support for their family's mission to foster love and acceptance in their community. Though surprised, Anthony and Celeste accepted with gratitude. They pledged to use the support not only for their family's stability, but also to create uplifting community projects, spreading the inclusive values that had guided them thus far. Emboldened by the foundation's resources and the enthusiastic backing of their new neighbors, Anthony and Celeste rolled out a series of community initiatives. Their first idea, an outdoor multicultural concert in the city's Central Park. They believed music could bring people together, transcending language, race, and background. Anthony liaised with local musicians, while Celeste coordinated the events, including booths featuring international cuisine from various cultures. On the day of the concert, families from all walks of life gathered on picnic blankets and lawn chairs. The air buzzed with excitement and curiosity. Celeste took the stage to introduce an African folk song. She shared the significance of its lyrics, a testament to strength and unity in the face of adversity. Many in the audience watched, enraptured, as Celeste's rich voice carried them through a cultural story older than themselves. Children clapped and tried to mimic the dance steps. Older folks nodded in appreciation of the rhythms. By the end, people approached Celeste with tears in their eyes, thanking her for sharing her heritage so openly. The crowd's response was heartfelt and electric, forging new friendships between strangers. Families swapped recipes and stories, discovering that they had more in common than they'd ever realized. Later that evening, as Anthony and Celeste packed up, they noticed the lingering warmth among the concert-goers. The event had transcended mere entertainment. It planted seeds of empathy and curiosity about different cultures. In the hush of their living room that night, they felt a deep contentment. Their family was no longer just existing. It was actively helping to reshape community mindsets. Buoyed by the success of the concert, Celeste decided to turn a long-held dream into reality, opening a handicraft shop highlighting African artistry. She wanted to honor her roots while creating a sustainable income stream. With the philanthropist's backing, she leased a small storefront on a bustling street. She named it Roots, symbolizing a return to her heritage and its proud, age-old traditions. Celeste reached out to friends and artisans she had known for years, people skilled in weaving, beadwork, and other crafts with deep cultural significance. Soon, the shop was adorned with brilliantly patterned fabrics, hand-carved wooden sculptures, and intricately braided jewelry. Each item told a story of resilience, love, and African ancestry. When customers entered Roots, soft African music played, and Celeste greeted them with genuine warmth. She took the time to explain the significance behind each piece, how its colors, motifs, and symbols traced back to stories handed down through generations. Word spread quickly, and the shop became a gathering place for those who wished to experience something beyond mass-produced commercial goods. Her children loved helping out. Aaliyah often stood behind the counter, proud to share her mother's cultural legacy with curious customers, explaining that these items were more than souvenirs. They were pieces of a living culture. Anthony, equally dedicated, assisted with financial details, ensuring the business was sustainable. In time, Roots became a touchstone for cultural exchange. Local residents, tourists, and even educators visited to learn about African traditions, while Celeste and her family thrived in the knowledge that they were making meaningful connections. Hearing of the store's success and seeing the love Celeste and Anthony poured into their community, more and more people were inspired to reach out. Their family became a model of openness, no longer just an example for their neighbors, but one that resonated with families dealing with similar struggles around the country. Their eldest daughter, Aaliyah, blossomed into a self-assured young woman, happy to share her family's experiences in public forums and proud of her mixed heritage. She was invited to speak at a local event celebrating cultural diversity, standing on a stage in front of parents, teachers, and community leaders. She recounted her journey, from feeling marginalized because of her skin color to finding strength in her family's love. She spoke candidly about the heartbreak of exclusion, but also emphasized how she eventually learned that acceptance and self-love often begin at home. Her speech left the audience teary-eyed and reflective. Dozens approached her afterward, some apologizing for past insensitivity and others asking for advice on handling similar issues in their own families. Through her words, Aaliyah brought home the message that differences, far from being divisive, can be the very threads that weave communities closer. Anthony and Celeste, watching from the sidelines, felt an overwhelming surge of pride in their daughter. She embodied the hope they'd fought so hard to protect, that their children would grow up confident, able to thrive in a world that was not always fair. With the philanthropic donations still at their disposal, Anthony and Celeste decided to found a resource center and scholarship program for multicultural children in underserved communities. They believed strongly that education should be accessible to all, regardless of background or socioeconomic status. Anthony coordinated with local officials and schools to locate an appropriate site for the center. Celeste, drawing on her passion for community building, designed programs that offered more than academic help, life skills classes, cultural workshops, and counseling for parents who felt overwhelmed by prejudices. When the facility finally opened its doors, it was a beacon of opportunity and acceptance. Young people of all ethnicities came to learn, share, and discover new abilities free from fear of bias. Simultaneously, they introduced the scholarship program, funded by the philanthropist and a growing number of local supporters, which prioritized children from lower income, multicultural backgrounds. At a small inauguration ceremony, Celeste presented the first scholarships. Each award signified a vote of confidence in that child's future. Parents wept tears of gratitude. Children clung to scholarship certificates as though holding onto a promise for a brighter tomorrow. Week after week, the center bustled with activity. Parents who once felt alone in their struggles discovered solace. Children who had been reluctant to embrace their multicultural identities found joy in exploring traditions from around the world. Volunteers joined in droves, moved by the center's mission and by the personal example Anthony and Celeste set. In the evenings, Anthony and Celeste would take a quiet moment to debrief. They'd talk about the day's triumphs and challenges, sometimes about finances and scheduling, other times about the emotional toll of hearing children's stories of racism or bullying. But they always ended those talks feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They were living proof that a single family's determination could spark positive change. Some years after relocating, Anthony received a sudden invitation from a long-lost part of his life, a message announcing a large gathering of his extended relatives. The invitation was sent by Aunt Lillian, who once strongly criticized his relationship with Celeste, warning him that a mixed-race marriage would bring scorn. Reading the invitation, Anthony hesitated. He remembered the unwelcoming words he had faced when he first introduced Celeste. He glanced toward his family. Celeste was helping the children with homework, bright laughter filling the air. Despite the bitterness of those memories, he realized this was an opportunity to address lingering tensions. "Let's go together," Celeste said gently, interpreting the worry etched on his face. Though nervous, she agreed it might be a chance to move forward. They arrived at the gathering, and the moment they stepped inside, conversation ceased. Countless pairs of eyes flickered their way. An air of awkwardness lingered before Aunt Lillian approached, her expression uncertain. "Anthony, Celeste," she began, voice shaking. "Thank you for coming. I wanted the whole family here." Swallowing his anxiety, Anthony stepped forward. "We're here because we wanted to give everyone a chance to meet us as we are now, a family." For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. Then slowly, stories spilled. How various relatives had heard about the center, the scholarships, and Celeste's shop. Some offered apologies, admitting they had been blinded by prejudice in the past. Others were simply curious, wondering how they had been so wrong about a marriage they once swore would never last. Aunt Lillian's eyes glimmered with tears. "We misjudged your love. If I could go back in time, I'd have tried to understand you both instead of condemning you." Celeste, feeling the swirl of emotions in the room, responded softly, "We appreciate your words. It wasn't easy, but we believed in our family." Anthony felt a heavy weight lift. He realized that change in perspective often takes witnessing genuine love and resilience. For once, he did not sense condemnation from his relatives, only regret, curiosity, and perhaps a new willingness to learn. Driving home from that gathering, Anthony and Celeste remained subdued, but in a grateful, relieved way. They had survived a formidable gauntlet of biases, not just from random strangers, but from people closest to Anthony. Now they had a glimmer of reconciliation. Nothing was perfect, and some might never fully embrace their relationship, but it was progress. Once home, Celeste embraced him, tears of both sorrow and relief in her eyes. "I'm glad we went. I feel lighter," she admitted. Anthony nodded, moved by her honesty. "We did the best we could, and it looks like at least some hearts have changed." Neither of them needed to say what they both felt, the freedom of finally shedding the albatross of familial judgment. Years passed, and with them came more blessings and accomplishments. Seeing how far they had come, Anthony and Celeste decided to renew their vows. It was a celebration not just of their own bond, but of the remarkable family they had grown into. They planned a simple garden ceremony, surrounded by the city's open-hearted people, new friends, the children, and even some reconciled relatives. On the day of the ceremony, Celeste wore a gown adorned with subtle African prints. Anthony wore a tailored suit with an embroidered stole reflecting her heritage's motifs. Their children stood by their sides, all smiles. During the vow renewal, Celeste and Anthony recounted their journey, how adversity shaped them, how they had learned that love isn't just a feeling but a steady force that can mend fractures and challenge hate. The entire crowd applauded not only the couple but the ethos they represented, a love that endures challenges, a commitment that conquers doubt. Tears glistened in the eyes of some who had once criticized or doubted them. Others smiled proudly, recalling how the couple's story had encouraged them to be kinder or more understanding in their own relationships. After exchanging rings once more, they embraced to thunderous applause. The children joined in, hugging their parents with tears of joy. For Anthony and Celeste, this moment was more than a personal milestone. It was a testament to everything they'd fought for. In time, word of Anthony and Celeste's story spread far beyond their city. A national organization hosting a conference on cultural harmony and racial equity invited them to speak. Though initially nervous, they accepted. They understood that their families' experiences could shine a light for others stumbling through similar hardships. When the conference day arrived, they addressed a packed auditorium of families, community leaders, activists, and scholars. Anthony spoke of how he used to be afraid of censure, of losing social standing by marrying Celeste. But love had not only freed him from that fear, it had given him purpose. Celeste spoke of her childhood, marked by racial taunts, and how she had vowed her own kids would never face that cruelty without a strong parental shield. Through heartbreak and hope, she and Anthony had woven a love story that overcame prejudice. The couple emphasized the universal truths that bound everyone together: family, unity, empathy. Their words resonated deeply with the audience, sparking a standing ovation. People lingered afterward for handshakes, photographs, and private discussions. Many confided that the talk emboldened them to defend their own cross-cultural relationships or adopt children of different backgrounds. In that moment, Celeste and Anthony realized anew. This journey of theirs was about more than a marriage. It had evolved into a radiant signal of possibility, proof that genuine love and unwavering respect can topple the walls of cultural and racial ignorance. In the wake of that conference, local and national news outlets highlighted Anthony and Celeste's path, their face-to-face honesty about the pain of prejudice and the joy of perseverance reached thousands who read, watched, and listened. Mail poured in, describing how their story had changed hearts, validated the struggles of other mixed-race couples, and renewed people's faith in love. A mother wrote to say she had nearly lost hope after her parents shunned her for dating a man of a different ethnicity, but she felt encouraged to keep trying. An elderly couple admitted to reflecting on how they treated their own granddaughter's partner. A social worker asked Anthony and Celeste if they could help shape an inclusive curriculum for local schools. Though deeply moved by the outpouring, Anthony and Celeste remained grounded. They knew theirs was just one story, but they happily continued their activism. They wrote articles, contributed to community outreach programs, and lent their voices to initiatives that championed acceptance. Friends sometimes joked that they had unwittingly become ambassadors of love. But if their families' experiences could truly soften hearts and inspire children to see beauty in diversity, they were more than willing to claim the title. Eventually, after many peaks and valleys, they took stock of their incredible journey. Though new challenges inevitably lay ahead, raising teenagers, supporting each other's career changes, perhaps confronting pockets of racism or resistance, their family was prepared. They had walked through the fire and emerged stronger, forging a life built on unity rather than homogeneity. Their community recognized in them not just a couple, but a living illustration of the power of compassion. Parents cited their story as evidence that any family, no matter its shape or background, could flourish in an environment of empathy. Through it all, Anthony and Celeste had shown that love, when nurtured with steadfast devotion, can bridge even the widest gaps in culture, race, and social acceptance. In the end, they had built far more than a home for themselves and their children. They had become a beacon of hope, illuminating the way for countless others seeking harmony in an often divided world.